In the 1960s, the Cold War arms race was all about one thing: speed. Faster, higher, more supersonic. The skies belonged to sleek interceptors and blazing fighters that could break the sound barrier with ease. But then came Vietnam, and everything changed. While nations competed to build the fastest jets, one aircraft proved that sometimes being useful beats being fast. It was short, it was stubby. Pilots nicknamed it the SLUF, the short little ugly fellow. This was the A-7 Corsair II, and despite looking like someone had taken a proper fighter jet and compressed it in Photoshop, this peculiar aircraft would shock North Vietnamese pilots, rewrite the rules of naval aviation, and drop more bombs with greater accuracy than almost any other American aircraft in Vietnam. Today, we're telling the story of how an ugly duckling became one of the war's most feared weapons, and how it could both obliterate ground targets and, when cornered, hold its own in a dogfight against enemy MiGs. Let's rewind to 1963. The U.S. Navy had a problem. Their Douglas A-4 Skyhawk was a solid light attack aircraft, but Vietnam was revealing its limitations. The Navy needed more range, more payload, and crucially, they needed it fast and cheap. In May 1963, the Navy issued a call to aircraft manufacturers with unusual requirements. The new aircraft had to be based on an existing design to save time and money. They wanted it in service by 1967, just 4 years away. Chance Vought, the legendary company that had built the gull-winged F-4U Corsair of World War II fame, had an idea. They'd recently produced the F-8 Crusader, a supersonic fighter beloved by Navy pilots. Lead engineer John Russell Clark and his team essentially asked, what if we took the Crusader and chopped it down? They shortened the fuselage, made it stubby and compact. They increased the wing area but removed the Crusader's sophisticated variable incidence wing mechanism. They deleted the afterburner entirely. Who needs supersonic speed when you're dropping bombs? The result looked strange. Where the F-8 was sleek and elegant, this new aircraft was, well, it looked like someone had sat on a Crusader, but it was simple, rugged, and could carry an enormous amount of ordnance. Vaught's proposal won in February 1964, beating out designs from Grumman, Douglas, and North American. The first contract was awarded in March, and then something remarkable happened. Just 18 months later, on September 27, 1965, the first A-7 flew its maiden flight. On November 2, 1965, test pilot John Conrad demonstrated the aircraft to VIP guests, and he did something extraordinary. He performed rapid rolls while carrying 6 250-pound bombs and 12 500-pound bombs beneath the wings. 9,000 pounds of ordnance, and the aircraft could still maneuver aggressively. The Navy dubbed it the Corsair II, linking it to its illustrious World War II predecessor. By 1966, the first training squadrons received their A-7As, and by December 1967, just over 4 years from the initial request, the A-7 was flying combat missions over North Vietnam. Attack Squadron 147, the Argonauts, became the first unit to take the A-7 into combat. Flying from the USS Ranger, they launched their first combat sortie on December 4, 1967, striking targets near Vinh. The results were immediate and impressive. In just 2 months, VA-147 flew 1,400 combat sorties, and they lost only 1 aircraft. That's an extraordinary survival rate for the intense air defenses over North Vietnam. But what made the A-7 so special? Why did pilots who initially called it the short little ugly fellow eventually come to love it? First, the payload. The A-7 could carry up to 15,000 pounds of ordnance. That's more bombs than a World War II B-17 flying fortress. It could haul conventional bombs, cluster munitions, rockets, missiles, and even nuclear weapons if required. It had 6 wing pylons and could be configured for virtually any strike mission. Second, the range. The A-7's combat radius was over 200 miles, nearly double that of the A-4 it replaced. Its turbofan engine, a non-afterburning design, was remarkably fuel-efficient. An A-7D carrying 12 500-pound bombs at 33,000 feet used only 3,350 pounds of fuel per hour. That's one-sixth the fuel consumption of an F-100 Super Sabre at equivalent thrust. This meant the A-7 could loiter over the battlefield, supporting troops for hours. Third, and perhaps most revolutionary, the avionics. The A-7 was one of the first aircraft to feature a modern heads-up display, projecting critical flight information and targeting data directly into the pilot's line of sight. Its integrated weapons computer was a game-changer. The system provided a bombing circular error probable of just 60 feet, regardless of pilot experience. A rookie could hit targets with the same precision as a veteran. This combination of sophisticated navigation and weapons delivery systems meant the A-7 could strike targets in darkness, bad weather, and conditions that would ground other aircraft. In the thick jungles and monsoon rains of Southeast Asia, this capability was priceless, and pilots loved the visibility. Unlike many contemporary aircraft where you sat deep inside the fuselage, the A-7's cockpit gave you an excellent view forward. Combined with the stability of the aircraft and the reliability of the systems, it made the SLUF surprisingly easy to fly, except for those tricky crosswind landings. The numbers tell the story of the A-7's effectiveness in Vietnam. U.S. Navy and Marine Corsair IIs flew more than 97,000 combat sorties over the course of the war. That's an astronomical number. During Operation Linebacker alone, the 1972 campaign to bomb North Vietnam into negotiations, the A-7 flew 60% of all Navy offensive sorties. And here's the stunning statistic. The A-7 was second only to the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress in the total amount of ordnance dropped on Hanoi. Think about that. A single-engine, subsonic light attack aircraft dropped more bombs than the F-4 Phantom, more than the F-105 Thunderchief, more than almost every aircraft in theater. Only the massive 8-engine strategic bomber delivered more. But unlike the B-52, which carpet-bombed from high altitude, the A-7 dropped its ordnance with surgical precision. It delivered more bombs per sortie with greater accuracy than any other American attack aircraft in the war. The Air Force version, the A-7D, was even more impressive from a survivability standpoint. Air Force Corsairs flew 12,928 combat sorties during the war. They lost only 6 aircraft. 6? That's the lowest loss rate of any U.S. fighter or bomber in the entire theater. The Navy lost more, about 98 A-7s total over the course of the war, but considering they flew nearly 100,000 sorties, that's still a remarkably low loss rate. The aircraft could absorb incredible punishment and still bring pilots home. One of the A-7's most dangerous missions was suppression of enemy air defenses, known as CD or Iron Hand missions. These aircraft would fly ahead of strike packages, deliberately attracting attention from North Vietnamese radar-guided surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery. When the enemy radars switched on to track them, the A-7s would locate and destroy the sites using anti-radiation missiles like the AGM-45 Shrike or conventional bombs. It was extraordinarily hazardous work. You were essentially painting a target on yourself. But the A-7's durability and the pilot's skill made it effective. The Corsair II also excelled in the Sandy mission, providing air cover for combat search and rescue operations to recover downed pilots. When an American aircrew ejected over enemy territory, A-7s would immediately respond, suppressing enemy fire so rescue helicopters could make the pickup. The A-7's high endurance meant it could orbit the rescue site for hours, and its heavy armament could saturate enemy positions. On November 18, 1972, Major Colin A. Clark led a successful rescue mission near Thanh Hoa that lasted 8.8 hours. His A-7D took numerous hits from enemy fire, but he and his wingman coordinated the rescue of a downed F-105 Wild Weasel crew. Clark was awarded the Air Force Cross for his actions. Now the A-7 was never designed to dogfight. It was a bomber, pure and simple. It couldn't go supersonic. It had no afterburner. Pilots joked that the Corsair is not very fast, but it sure is slow. But it did carry 2 20mm Colt MiG-12 cannons, later upgraded to a single M61A1 Vulcan rotary cannon, and it could mount AM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. And here's what North Vietnamese MiG pilots discovered to their surprise. In the hands of a skilled pilot, the SLUF could fight. The most dramatic encounter occurred on May 10, 1972, the first day of Operation Linebacker the Fur. Two separate incidents that day would enter A-7 legend. Lieutenant George T. Goryanek of VA-147 was flying his A-7E on a strike mission when he was jumped by a North Vietnamese MiG-17, reportedly flown by veteran pilot Duong Trung Tan. In the subsequent engagement, Goryanek managed to damage the MiG with his cannon. The North Vietnamese pilot may have broken off the engagement due to battle damage, but the second incident that day is even more remarkable. Lieutenant Alan E. Junker of VA-146, the Blue Diamonds, had just completed a bombing run on the Hai Duong Railway, marshalling yards connecting Haiphong to Hanoi. Flying alone after losing sight of his flight leader, Junker was heading for the coast when he spotted what appeared to be an A-6 intruder approaching. It wasn't an A-6. It was a silver-gray MiG-17, the same one that had engaged Goryanek, possibly still looking for a fight. Junker's A-7E was clean. No bombs, but also no air-to-air missiles. He'd expended all his ordnance on the target. He had only his cannon, and that MiG was closing fast. What happened next was a masterclass in flying a slow aircraft against a faster adversary. Junker knew the MiG-17's weaknesses. While the MiG was faster in level flight and could turn tighter at high altitude, it had an inferior roll rate compared to the Corsair II. Junker would have to use that advantage. He dropped to treetop level, below 100 feet, and pushed his speed past 500 knots. He began jinxing in a sine wave pattern, rolling aggressively left and right, up and down, using the A-7's superior roll rate to disrupt the MiG pilot's aim. The MiG pilot was firing. Red tracer rounds, appearing like golf balls, whizzed past Junker's cockpit so close he could hear the muzzle blast over his engine. He wondered if his wing would be shot off at 500 knots. Pulling more than 6 Gs, Junker threw his aircraft hard left, then hard right. The MiG was above him at 2 o'clock, trying to line up another shot. Then the coastline appeared. Junker had made it. But the MiG wasn't done. At that moment, F-4 Phantoms from the Combat Air Patrol arrived. Lieutenant Commander Bud Cannon saddled in behind the MiG-17 and shot it down. There's debate about what happened to that MiG pilot. Some reports say Duong Trung Tan returned to base damaged. Others claim he was shot down by Cannon. But one thing is certain, Junker's unarmed A-7 had survived a determined attack by an enemy fighter through superior flying skill. That May 10th incident wasn't a fluke. The A-7, while not a dogfighter by design, proved surprisingly capable in air combat training. After the Vietnam War, when the Navy emphasized dissimilar air combat training, A-7 pilots regularly mixed it up with F-4 Phantoms in MiG Alley, designated training airspace where aircraft from carrier air wings could practice dogfighting. One F-4 pilot, known as Hawk, recounted an unforgettable engagement where he and his wingman took on 4 A-7 Corsair IIs. The A-7 pilots were aggressive and skilled. One Corsair pilot, Pete Taylor, came out of the overhead in a vertical dive from 25,000 feet, expertly managing his energy with speed brakes. He saddled right onto Hawk's F-4 during violent maneuvering, something Hawk thought was impossible given how they were flying. Hawk later admitted, "I've never forgotten that experience. I couldn't believe anyone could have joined on my airplane the way we were maneuvering. That just couldn't happen. It was completely unexpected." The A-7 wasn't designed for this. It had no afterburner, limited thrust, and a lower top speed than any contemporary fighter. But it had a few things going for it: excellent roll rate, good low-speed handling, decent maneuverability when clean, and pilots who understood how to exploit those advantages. When flying at low altitude with no external stores, a clean A-7 could turn surprisingly well. Pilots reported seeing Air National Guard A-7s dogfighting German F-4 Phantoms at low level, and the little F-odd sucker could turn. Now let's be clear, in a real combat situation, an A-7 pilot wouldn't want to dogfight a dedicated fighter like a MiG-21 or F-4 Phantom. The smart move was to stay low, stay fast, and use the superior roll rate to evade. but if cornered, the SLUF could fight its way out. Only one A-7 was confirmed lost in air-to-air combat during the entire Vietnam War, shot down by a MiG-21 in May 1972. Even that loss is disputed, as American records list the loss as due to a surface-to-air missile hit. The fact that air-to-air losses were so rare speaks to either the A-7 pilot's skill at avoiding fights or their ability to survive when fights found them. The A-7 Corsair II served the United States for 25 years, from Vietnam through Operation Desert Storm in 1991. After Vietnam, it flew combat missions over Grenada, Lebanon, Libya, and Panama. It evolved with upgrades, forward-looking infrared, target recognition attack multi-sensors, laser-guided weapons, and more powerful engines. By Desert Storm, only two Navy A-7E squadrons remained, VA-46 and VA-72, flying from the USS John F. Kennedy. They flew their final missions bombing targets in Iraq and Kuwait, marking the end of an era. The Corsair II was replaced by the FA-18 Hornet in Navy service and the A-10 Thunderbolt II and F-16 Fighting Falcon in the Air Force, but its legacy endures. The A-7 pioneered the heads-up display that every modern fighter uses today. It proved that precision and reliability could matter more than raw speed. It demonstrated that an aircraft designed purely for bombing could, when necessary, defend itself against enemy fighters. And for the North Vietnamese pilots who encountered it, the A-7 was a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that short, stubby, ugly aircraft dropping from the clouds could hit your airfield with devastating accuracy. And if you tried to chase it down, well, you might find yourself in a fight you didn't expect. The crews who flew the SLUF loved it. They trusted it to bring them home. And in the dangerous skies over Vietnam, that trust was earned through thousands of missions, hundreds of thousands of bombs dropped, and a combat record that few aircraft have ever matched. The A-7 Corsair II, slow, ugly, and absolutely deadly, sometimes that's exactly what you need.